It all started when Jenny and I decided we needed a break. Work had been killing me, and Jenny was dealing with her own stress. So, we thought, why not just disappear for the weekend? We found this cabin on Airbnb that seemed perfect. It was tucked away in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by woods, and the pictures made it look like something out of a cozy holiday movie. Wood paneling, big fireplace, comfy chairs, just pure, peaceful vibes. Plus, it was surprisingly affordable, which felt like a steal for a private cabin all to ourselves. "Looks like we hit the jackpot," Jenny said, scrolling through the listing again. The reviews were all glowing too. People kept saying how amazing the host, Michael, was. Super responsive, very helpful, and the cabin's exactly as described, one person wrote. I was sold. The drive up there was pretty smooth, which helped us stay in a good mood. We had the music going, windows down, and for the first time in weeks, it felt like we could actually relax. As we got closer to the cabin, the road turned from smooth highway to a narrow dirt path, surrounded by tall trees that made everything feel secluded. Jenny leaned her head out the window, taking in the fresh air. "I can already feel the stress melting away," she joked. But as soon as we pulled up to the cabin, I noticed something was off. The pictures had definitely done this place a few favors. The outside looked tired. The paint was peeling like nobody had taken care of it in years, and there were weeds crawling up the front porch. The windows were kind of foggy, not the bright, clean look we saw online. Jenny didn't say anything, but I could tell by the way her smile faded that she was thinking the same thing. I tried to shake it off. "I mean, it's rustic, right? Isn't that what we wanted?" I said, hoping to keep the mood light. She gave me a half smile and shrugged. We grabbed our bags and walked up to the door. According to the listing, there was supposed to be a key in a lockbox on the side of the door. I opened the box and it was empty. "Are you serious?" I muttered under my breath. I could feel the tension starting to creep in. I double-checked the listing to make sure we were at the right place. Yep, this was definitely it. "Maybe he just forgot to put it back," Jenny suggested, though she didn't sound too convinced. I pulled out my phone to message Michael, but of course, we had barely any signal this far out in the woods. I sent a message anyway, just in case it went through. Asterisk, "Hey, we're here, but the key's missing from the lockbox. Any chance you left it somewhere else?" Asterisk, after standing around awkwardly for a few minutes, Jenny pointed to one of the side windows that was slightly open. "I guess we could try getting in through there." I wasn't thrilled about the idea of breaking into the place we rented, but what other option did we have? I squeezed through the window and dropped into the living room. The cabin had that musty, old wood smell, and the furniture looked a lot older in person, like thrift store old. I walked over to the front door and unlocked it so Jenny could come in. "Well, at least we're inside," she said, trying to stay positive. We put our bags down and started looking around. The layout was nice enough, but everything just felt a little off. The floors creaked loudly with every step, and the windows were dirtier than we realized from the outside. There were also a few strange, dusty spots on the walls where it looked like something had been taken down recently, like old paintings or pictures. It gave the place a weird, unfinished vibe. Still, we were determined to make the most of it. I lit a fire, and Jenny started unpacking. The Wi-Fi was spotty at best, so we resigned ourselves to a weekend of reading and board games, which honestly didn't sound too bad. "We came out here to unplug anyway, right?" I said, forcing a grin. Jenny nodded, but I could tell she was still a little uneasy. I couldn't blame her. Something just didn't feel right. But I kept telling myself it was just the isolation, the unfamiliar setting. We'd settle in soon enough. Or so I thought. By the time we got inside and started settling in, the sun was already beginning to set. It wasn't like we had planned on doing much that first night. Just a simple dinner, maybe some wine by the fire. But something about the cabin kept making me feel uneasy. I could tell Jenny was feeling the same way. She kept glancing around like she was expecting something to happen. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was just the unfamiliarity of the place. New surroundings can do that to you, right? I went into the kitchen to check out what we had for dinner. The fridge was a little older than expected, humming loudly in the quiet cabin. I opened it up and found it almost empty except for a half carton of eggs and some expired milk. Guess Michael forgot to mention we'd need to grab groceries. I muttered, calling back to Jenny. "We'll have to make do with what we brought." She didn't respond, so I stuck my head out of the kitchen. "Jenny, She was standing near the window, her back to me, staring outside into the trees. "Did you hear that?" she asked softly. "Hear what?" "Footsteps. I thought I heard footsteps outside." I walked over and stood beside her, looking out the same window. There was nothing but the trees, still and quiet under the dimming light. "Probably just an animal," I said, though I didn't hear anything either. "We're in the middle of the woods, after all. Could be deer or a raccoon." She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. Her eyes stayed locked on the tree line, like she was waiting for something or someone to appear. "Come on, let's eat. You'll feel better once we've got some food in us," I said, trying to sound reassuring. I headed back to the kitchen and started pulling out the snacks we'd packed. It wasn't much, just some sandwiches, chips, and a bottle of wine. Definitely not gourmet, but it'd do for the night. As we sat down to eat, I tried to lighten the mood. "So, first impressions? What do you think of our little getaway?" I asked, forcing a smile. Jenny looked around the cabin before answering. "I mean, it's not what I expected. The pictures were, I don't know, nicer. This place feels older, kind of neglected." She wasn't wrong. I had noticed it too. It was like the cabin had been frozen in time, abandoned for years, and barely touched up for guests. The smell of dust and mildew lingered in the air, and the creaky floorboards made it feel like the whole place could collapse at any moment. But I wasn't about to let that ruin our trip. We'd come here to unwind, and I was determined to make it work. "Yeah, I get that," I admitted. "But look, we got a fire going, we got wine. It's not so bad, right? Could be kind of romantic." Jenny gave me a small smile and took a sip of her wine. "Yeah, maybe you're right. It's just, I don't know. Something feels off." Before I could respond, there was a loud thud from upstairs. Both of us froze. I glanced at Jenny, whose eyes had gone wide again. The sound was heavy, like something had fallen or someone was walking around up there. "Maybe it's the house settling?" I suggested, though even I didn't believe it. The sound was too deliberate, too solid to be just the house creaking. My mind immediately went to the worst-case scenario. Someone else was in the house. "I'll check it out," I said, standing up before she could protest. I grabbed my phone and headed toward the staircase, the floor creaking under my feet as I moved. The air felt thicker the closer I got to the stairs, like something was weighing me down. I stood at the bottom step, looking up into the dark hallway above. The cabin didn't have great lighting, and there was only a dim bulb casting a weak glow from the top of the stairs. "Be careful," Jenny whispered from the living room. I nodded, swallowing my own nerves, and slowly made my way up. Each step groaned louder than the last, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached the top, I stood there for a moment, listening. The hallway was long, with 2 bedrooms and a bathroom on either side. Everything seemed quiet now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was up here with me. I opened the door to the first bedroom, the one Jenny and I had planned to sleep in. It looked normal enough: old wooden bed frame, mismatched sheets, a small dresser in the corner. But as I stepped further into the room, I saw something strange. There were scratches on the floor near the bed, like something heavy had been dragged across it recently. My stomach turned. Was someone living here before us? Or worse, still living here? I quickly checked the second bedroom and bathroom, but they were empty. No signs of anyone hiding out. But those scratches, they bothered me. I couldn't stop thinking about them as I headed back downstairs. "Everything's fine," I lied when I saw Jenny's anxious face. "Probably just the house. You know, old places make weird noises." She nodded, but I could tell she didn't believe me. To be honest, I didn't believe myself either. That night, we sat by the fire in silence, both of us too nervous to really relax. Every creak, every gust of wind, felt amplified in the quiet cabin. Jenny kept glancing at the windows like she was expecting someone to appear at any moment. I was trying to play it cool, but deep down I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right here. Something was off about this cabin, and it wasn't just the scratches or the sounds. It was like the whole place had a bad energy, a heaviness that weighed down on us the longer we stayed. We eventually went to bed, but sleep didn't come easy. That night was when things really started to get weird. After tossing and turning for what felt like hours, I finally drifted off, only to be woken up by a sound. It was subtle at first, like something scraping against the outside wall of the cabin. In my half-asleep state, I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was just tree branches in the wind or maybe an animal moving around outside. But the noise got louder. I blinked in the darkness, listening closely. It wasn't wind. It wasn't an animal. It sounded like footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the cabin. I could hear the crunch of gravel underfoot, getting closer, then farther away, like whoever or whatever was outside was pacing. I lay there for a moment, my heart pounding in my ears. The more I listened, the more I was sure it wasn't just my imagination. There was someone out there, walking around. I turned to look at Jenny, who was still asleep beside me, her breathing soft and steady. I didn't want to wake her, didn't want to freak her out unless I was sure. But then the footsteps stopped, right outside our bedroom window. I held my breath, staring at the window, which was barely visible through the thin curtains. For a long moment, there was nothing, just silence. Then, suddenly, there was a loud tap on the glass. Once, twice, like someone was lightly knocking on the window, testing to see if anyone was inside. I shot up in bed, my heart racing. "Jenny," I whispered urgently, shaking her awake. "Jenny, wake up," she groaned, rolling over groggily. What is it?" "Shoo." I hushed her. "Listen." We both sat there in silence, straining to hear any noise. For a few seconds, it was dead quiet, and I began to think maybe I'd imagined it. But then the footsteps started again, this time moving toward the front of the cabin. "Oh my God, what is that?" Jenny whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know. Someone's out there," I whispered back. I didn't want to panic, but my mind was racing with possibilities. Was it a hiker who'd gotten lost? Or was it someone with bad intentions? I grabbed my phone and quickly checked the time. It was 2:14 a.m., and there was no signal. I tried to send a message to Michael, but the spinning icon at the top of the screen told me it wasn't going through. "Damn it," I muttered under my breath. "What do we do?" Jenny asked, sitting up in bed and clutching the blankets tightly around her. I thought about going outside to check, but the idea of confronting whoever was out there didn't sit right with me. We were isolated, miles away from help, with no cell service. If something went wrong, we'd be on our own. "We stay inside," I said, try to sound more confident than I felt. "We lock all the doors and windows, and we stay put until morning." Jenny nodded, her face pale in the dim light from the hallway. Okay, let's do that." I got up and quickly checked the window, pulling the curtains aside just enough to peek out. The moonlight barely illuminated the yard, but I couldn't see anyone or anything moving. I tiptoed out of the bedroom, checking the front door, the back door, and the windows in the living room. Everything was locked, just like I'd left it. But the feeling that someone had been watching us, standing just outside, wouldn't go away. I went back to the bedroom, where Jenny was sitting up in bed, staring at the door like she was waiting for it to swing open at any moment. "Everything's locked," I told her. "We should be fine. But what if whoever it is tries to get in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They'd have to break a window or something," I said. "We'd hear it. We'll know." Jenny didn't look reassured, and to be honest, neither was I. But there wasn't much else we could do. We climbed back into bed, trying to calm ourselves down, but every little noise made us both jump. The wind outside picked up, making the branches scrape against the roof, and the occasional creak of the old cabin didn't help either. After what felt like hours of lying there, the footsteps didn't return. There were no more knocks on the window. The cabin was quiet, except for the soft crackling of the dying fire in the living room. But sleep didn't come easily. Every few minutes, I would open my eyes, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something to happen. I could feel Jenny doing the same beside me, her breathing shallow and fast. Sometime in the early morning, exhaustion finally overtook me, and I drifted off into a restless sleep. When I woke up, sunlight was streaming through the thin curtains, and for a moment, I wondered if I had imagined the whole thing. But then I saw Jenny, sitting on the edge of the bed, wide awake and clutching her phone. "I didn't sleep at all," she said quietly when she saw me stirring. "Did you hear anything else?" I asked, my voice hoarse from sleep. "No, not after those footsteps. But I think someone was out there last night. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the grogginess. Yeah, I heard it too. We sat in silence for a few moments, both of us too tired and freaked out to know what to say next. It was broad daylight now, and the idea of someone lurking around in the middle of the night felt almost ridiculous in the light of day. But I knew what I'd heard, and Jenny had heard it too. I got up and pulled on some clothes. I'm going to check outside, just to see if there's anything out of place. Jenny looked at me like she wanted to protest, but she just nodded. I stepped out into the yard, the cool morning air hitting my face. The woods were quiet, the kind of peaceful silence that comes after a long night of rain or wind. But as I walked around the cabin, my eyes scanned the ground, looking for footprints or any sign of someone having been there. And then I saw them. Fresh footprints, human footprints circling the cabin. The sight of the footprints sent a chill down my spine. They were clear, unmistakable. Someone had been walking around the cabin last night. The prints were deep in the soft dirt, circling the house, stopping just below our bedroom window. Whoever it was had been right there, right next to us, while we lay in bed trying to pretend everything was fine. Jenny, I called, my voice cracking a little. She was already standing at the door, looking at me with wide eyes, as if she knew exactly what I'd found without even needing to see it. "What is it?" she asked, stepping out onto the porch, her face pale. I pointed at the footprints. Someone was out here last night. They walked all the way around the cabin. She came down the steps, staring at the tracks with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Why didn't they try to come inside? What were they doing out here?" "I don't know," I said, shaking my head. "But we need to figure out what's going on." After a quick breakfast, neither of us had much of an appetite, but we forced ourselves to eat something. We decided to take a walk around the property. There had to be some explanation for what was happening. Maybe we'd find more footprints, maybe there was another cabin nearby, or maybe by some crazy chance, someone really was just lost and wandering around in the dark. But the more we walked, the more uneasy I felt. The trees surrounding the cabin were thick, their branches tangled together overhead, creating a canopy that blocked out most of the morning light. The woods felt darker than they should have, like the trees were closing in around us. The further we walked, the quieter everything became. No birds, no rustling of animals, just the sound of our own footsteps crunching on the dead leaves. "Do you think it's safe here?" Jenny asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would disturb whatever was lurking in the trees. I glanced around nervously, the weight of her question settling in my chest. "I don't know," I admitted. "I thought it was just nerves, but now, I'm not so sure." As we continued walking, we found a narrow trail, almost hidden beneath overgrown weeds and fallen branches. It didn't look like it had been used in years, but something about it drew me in. "Let's check this out," I said, pointing down the path. Jenny hesitated, glancing around at the darkening woods. "Are you sure? This feels wrong. I just want to see if it leads anywhere." "Maybe there's another house nearby," I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. "If we find someone else out here, maybe they've seen something." Reluctantly, she followed me down the trail. The deeper we went, the more unsettling everything felt. The air seemed colder, heavier, and the trees loomed taller. I could feel my heart racing, but I pushed forward, determined to find some kind of explanation. And then we found it. The shack. It was small and run down, half hidden beneath the overgrown brush. The roof was sagging, and the wooden walls were covered in moss and vines, as if nature had been trying to reclaim it. There were no windows, just a single door hanging on rusty hinges. The whole thing looked like it could collapse at any moment. But what really made my stomach drop were the fresh footprints leading up to the door, identical to the ones we'd seen around the cabin. "Is this where they've been staying?" Jenny asked, her voice shaky. "Whoever was walking around last night?" "I don't know," I said, staring at the shack with a mixture of curiosity and dread. "But I think we need to check it out." Jenny grabbed my arm. "Are you serious? What if someone's in there? What if they're dangerous?" I hesitated, knowing she was right, but something about this place felt important, like it was the key to whatever had been happening. I couldn't just walk away. "I'll be careful," I promised. "Just stay back. If something feels off, we'll leave." She didn't look happy, but she nodded, stepping back as I approached the door. I reached out and touched the handle. It was cold, colder than I expected. I pulled, and the door creaked open slowly, the rusty hinges groaning in protest. The inside was dark and smelled like damp wood and rot. My eyes adjusted to the gloom, and I stepped inside cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. The floor was covered in dirt and leaves, and in the corner, there was a pile of old blankets and clothes tossed haphazardly on the ground. It looked like someone had been sleeping there recently. And then I saw it, a notebook lying on the floor next to the makeshift bed. I bent down, picking it up carefully. The cover was worn and water-stained, the pages yellowed with age. But as I flipped through it, I realized it wasn't old at all. The writing inside was fresh, the ink dark and smudged in places. "What is it?" Jenny called from outside, her voice trembling. "I found a notebook," I said, flipping through the pages. The writing was messy, barely legible in some spots, but one thing stood out. Over and over again, the same phrase was scrawled across the pages. Asterisk, stay away. Don't trust him. Asterisk. What the hell? I muttered, turning the pages faster. There were drawings, too. Crude sketches of the cabin, the woods, and something else, something I couldn't quite make out. It looked like a figure, drawn in the shadows, lurking just beyond the trees. I stepped back, my mind racing. Who had written this? And who were they talking about? Was it Michael? The host who was supposed to be so friendly and helpful? Or someone else? I hurried back outside, where Jenny was pacing nervously. "We need to get out of here," I said, clutching the notebook in my hand. "Something's seriously wrong." "What did you find?" she asked, her voice rising in panic. "I don't know exactly," I said, shaking my head. "But whoever wrote this was warning us. They were staying here, watching the cabin, and whoever they were afraid of, it wasn't us." Jenny's face went pale. "You think it's Michael?" "I don't know, but we need to leave. Now." Without another word, we turned and hurried back down the trail, the thick trees pressing in on us as we ran. The shack, the footprints, the notebook, all of it swirled in my head, but one thought rose above the rest. We weren't alone out here, and whoever was out here with us didn't want us to leave alive. When we got back to the cabin, I immediately felt like we had made a mistake coming here. There was a weight in the air, something dark and unsettling that hadn't been there before. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just my imagination running wild after finding that notebook. But Jenny's pale face told me she was thinking the same thing. I checked my phone again, still no signal. No way to call for help, no way to contact anyone. It was just us stranded in the middle of nowhere with no idea who or what was out there. "I don't want to stay here another minute," Jenny said, her voice trembling. "Let's just pack our stuff and go. We can drive until we get signal and find another place." I nodded, but as we started packing our bags, there was a knock at the door. We both froze. It was a soft knock, barely audible, but enough to send a jolt of fear through both of us. Jenny looked at me with wide eyes, her hands gripping the edge of the suitcase. I took a deep breath and motioned for her to stay put. Slowly, I walked toward the door, every step feeling like it weighed a ton. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. When I reached the door, I peeked through the peephole. Standing on the porch was a man in his mid-40s, smiling like nothing was wrong. He was holding a key in his hand, jingling it lightly as he waited. It was Michael, the host. I opened the door cautiously, trying to hide my nerves. "Michael, right?" "Yep, that's me," he said with a big, cheerful grin. "Sorry about the key mix-up yesterday. I figured I'd swing by and drop off the spare one. Didn't mean to leave you guys in a bind." I stared at him, trying to read his expression. His smile was wide, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Something about him felt wrong. The cheerful tone, the timing, it didn't add up. Why was he just now showing up, and why did it feel like he wasn't telling us everything? "Thanks," I said slowly, taking the key from his hand. But we were actually just getting ready to leave. His smile faltered for a second. "Leaving? So soon? I thought you guys booked for the whole weekend." "We've had some weird experiences," I explained, trying not to sound too paranoid. "Weird noises, someone walking around the cabin last night. And then we found this." I pulled out the notebook from my pocket, holding it up for him to see. It was in a shack out in the woods. Michael's expression changed. It was subtle, but I saw it. His smile dropped, and for a split second, there was something else in his eyes. Fear? Panic? Whatever it was, he hid it quickly, his smile returning as if nothing had happened. "Oh, that old thing," he said with a nervous chuckle. "Yeah, some squatters probably left that behind. Happens sometimes when people find abandoned places in the woods. But don't worry, you guys are perfectly safe here." I didn't believe him, not for a second. "Look," I said, my voice firmer now, "we don't feel comfortable staying here. We're leaving." Michael took a step forward, and I instinctively moved back. "You don't have to rush off," he said, his smile now looking forced. "Really, I promise, there's nothing to worry about. The area can seem spooky at night, but it's just your mind playing tricks. I've had plenty of guests, and nothing bad has ever happened here." Jenny appeared behind me, her voice shaking. "We found footprints around the cabin. Last night, someone was out there, walking around." Michael's eyes flicked to Jenny, then back to me. The smile was gone now. His face was serious, almost cold. "Look, I know it's probably unsettling, but I can assure you no one was out there. The woods can mess with your sense of sound. Animals, wind, branches. You'd be surprised what it can sound like in the dark. You've got nothing to worry about." I didn't know what to say. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to leave, but there was something in the way he was looking at us that made it feel like we were trapped. "Thanks for the key," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But we're still leaving." Michael didn't argue. He just stared at us for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slowly, like he had decided something. "All right," he said quietly, "if that's what you want. But be careful out there. The roads can be tricky this time of year. Easy to get lost." I nodded, trying not to show how rattled I was. "We'll be fine." Michael turned and walked back to his truck, but something about the way he moved felt strange, deliberate, slow, as if he was waiting for us to say something, do something. We watched him climb into his truck and drive off down the long dirt road, disappearing into the trees. As soon as he was out of sight, Jenny turned to me. "We need to go? Now." I didn't argue. We rushed back inside, throwing our stuff into our bags as quickly as possible. My hands were shaking, and I kept glancing out the windows, half expecting Michael's truck to come back at any moment. I didn't know what he was hiding, but I knew one thing for sure. We weren't safe here. Just as we were zipping up the last bag, there was a loud thud from upstairs. Both of us froze. It was the same sound we'd heard the night before. Heavy, deliberate, like something or someone was moving around up there. My heart pounded in my chest as I looked at Jenny. "We need to leave now." Without another word, we grabbed our bags and bolted for the door. I didn't even bother locking it behind us. We threw everything into the car and peeled out of the driveway, the tires kicking up dirt as we sped down the narrow road. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Michael standing in the doorway, watching us leave. But the cabin was already fading from view, swallowed by the trees. For the first time in hours, I let out a breath I didn't even know I'd been holding. We were getting out. We were safe. Or at least, that's what I thought. As we drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, like someone or something was following us through the woods, hidden just beyond the tree line. And then I saw it. In the mirror, a figure standing on the side of the road, barely visible through the trees. Too far away to make out any details, but close enough that I knew it was real. Just standing there, watching us. I pressed down harder on the gas, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Whatever was going on, whatever we had stumbled into, it wasn't over. Not yet. We drove in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on us like a storm cloud. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the figure again, but the road behind us was empty. Jenny sat beside me, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, staring out the window. Neither of us said a word as the dense forest began to thin out, giving way to open fields. I kept my foot on the gas, determined to put as much distance between us and that cabin as possible. After about 20 minutes of driving, Jenny finally spoke. "Do you think we're safe now?" I didn't answer right away. The truth was I wasn't sure. "I hope so," I said quietly, keeping my eyes on the road. But something about all of this doesn't make sense. Michael, the shack, those footprints, it's like we walked into something we weren't supposed to. Jenny nodded, her face pale. What did he mean when he said be careful out there? It sounded like a threat. Yeah, it did. I muttered, gripping the steering wheel tighter. It's like he knew something he wasn't telling us. The road stretched ahead of us, winding through the countryside, and for a moment, it felt like we were finally leaving everything behind. But that feeling didn't last long. About 10 minutes later, I noticed something odd. The road ahead looked familiar. Too familiar. Wait, didn't we pass that barn already? I asked, pointing to a rundown building on the side of the road. Jenny frowned. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention. I kept driving, but the uneasy feeling in my gut grew stronger. A few minutes later, I saw it again. The same barn, the same bend in the road. My stomach dropped. We're going in circles, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What? How is that possible? Jenny asked, panic rising in her voice. We've been driving straight this whole time. I don't know. I shouted, frustration boiling over. I slammed my hand on the steering wheel, trying to keep my cool, but my mind was racing. How could we be going in circles? There hadn't been any turns, no crossroads. Just this endless, looping road. Maybe we missed a turn somewhere? Jenny suggested, but I could tell she didn't believe it any more than I did. I slowed the car down, looking around for any sign of a way out. But the road ahead just kept stretching on, identical to what we had already seen. And then something caught my eye. Standing at the edge of the field, just beyond the road, was the same figure I'd seen in the rearview mirror. I slammed on the brakes, bringing the car to a screeching halt. What is it? Jenny asked, her voice shaky. I pointed out the window. There! Do you see that? She followed my gaze and gasped. Oh my God! Who is that? The figure was standing perfectly still, half hidden in the shadows of the trees. I couldn't make out any details, just a dark shape watching us. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt that familiar sense of dread creeping back in. Whoever this was, they had been following us. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I'm not staying to find out, I said, slamming the car into gear and speeding off down the road again. But the road didn't change. No matter how fast I drove, it was like we were stuck in some kind of loop, always coming back to the same spot, the same bend, the same barn. And every time we passed, that figure was there, waiting, watching. Jenny was crying now, her voice trembling with fear. What do we do? We're trapped. We're never getting out of here. I wanted to reassure her, to tell her everything would be fine, but I couldn't. I had no idea what was happening. All I knew was that we had to keep moving. We'll find a way out, I said, more to convince myself than her. As we rounded the bend for what felt like the 100th time, something new came into view. The cabin. The same cabin we had just left hours ago. No, I shouted, slamming on the brakes again. This can't be happening. We left. We drove for miles. Jenny was sobbing now, her hands covering her face. How is this possible? How are we back here? I couldn't answer. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of the impossible. The cabin stood there, looking exactly the same as when we had left it. The door was slightly ajar, as if waiting for us to come back inside. And then I saw him, Michael. He was standing on the porch, smiling that same too friendly smile, like nothing had ever happened. He waved at us, as if he had been expecting us to come back all along. No, I whispered, shaking my head. This can't be real. But it was. Michael stepped off the porch and started walking toward the car, his smile never wavering. I told you to be careful, he called out, his voice calm and steady, like he wasn't the least bit surprised to see us again. This place is not like anywhere else. You can't just leave. What the hell is going on? I shouted, my voice cracking with fear and frustration. Michael stopped a few feet from the car, his smile fading. You're part of this now. Once you come here, you're part of the woods, the land, the cabin. It doesn't let you go. Jenny let out a terrified sob. What do you mean? We didn't do anything. Michael sighed, looking almost sad. It's not about what you did. It's about where you are. You've crossed into something ancient, and now it won't let you leave. Not unless it wants you to. I stared at him, my mind spinning, trying to process what he was saying. So what? We're just stuck here? Forever? Michael's eyes darkened. You might find a way out. Some do, but most don't. The woods, they have a way of keeping you close. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to think. My entire body felt numb. And then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, Michael turned and walked back toward the cabin, disappearing inside without another word. For a long time, neither Jenny nor I spoke. We just sat there, staring at the cabin, at the road, at the woods that surrounded us, trapping us in this nightmare. Finally, Jenny broke the silence. What do we do now? I didn't have an answer. We could try driving again, try to escape, but something told me it would be useless. We were caught in something far beyond our understanding, something we couldn't just run away from. I don't know. I whispered, my voice hollow. I don't know. And as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the road, I realized that we might never find out. The cabin wasn't just a place. It was a trap, and we were never going to escape.